Join me as I spend a moment of the game and share my opinions on Guild Wars 2 has fantastic combat. Players can unlock most if not all their weapon skills by level 10, yet it has a lot of depth. Skill points earned can be spent on purchasing utility skills, and those utility skills can then be empowered by traits. It doesn't punish the player for experimenting, since you can respec traits at any time for a small cost, while the skill points are abundant enough to not be an issue. The players can test out their builds in a place called the Heart of the Mist. This place levels up the player to level 80, and they have access to maxed out armor, weapons, and runes. So they can test out different builds with different runes, and they can try it out on target dummies as well as active NPCs with different classes within there. There's also siege weapons that player can test out to learn the ropes to World v World, as well as an underwater area. The main strength of Guild Wars 2 is the simplicity designed into the cogs of the game. This allows ArenaNet to add and remove things modularly at a rate much faster than your typical MMO. Every quest involves killing, picking up something, talking to someone, or killing something bigger. Of course, there are unique exceptions, but the majority of the game is built around those mechanics. The ingenuity comes in from the lore being a separate entity from the quests themselves. The lore is instead scattered about the world in the form of the player's own story, scouts, and dungeons. This gives the option for players who don't care about the lore to just bash things in the face while also catering to the lore buffs, who can seek out the lore on their own time, outside of dungeons. There is a ton of PvE content for the player to do. The game rewards players for everything from exploring new areas, to jumping on stuff, doing mazes, even just standing around and listening to wonderful dialogue.
Look, we're with the Order of Whispers. We've been sent to get you out of here.
We're here to abscond with you, and with the beer. The beer's already vanished into thin air, so now it's your turn.
Story missions incorporate a few players' choices at character creation and plays out in short story arcs. The design for short story arcs avoids the long development times for branching stories, but it still allows the player to feel like their choices matter in a character's development by compensating with more choices more often. So the player chooses at the end of each story arc some permanent choice that the player themselves remember and the game itself carries on. So each player has their own story to tell when they speak with friends, and the experience can be quite different. There's a crap ton of jumping puzzles for players to find. These are unmarked on the map and somewhat hidden, waiting for those vigilant enough to find them or those with Google. They reward the player by giving a chest or achievement, but oftentimes the jumping puzzle itself is reward enough. Dungeons are like the single group raid content of Guild Wars 2. The story mode for dungeons sets up the lore for the dungeon area and tells a story as the player progresses further. They're pretty damn challenging and are not to be done alone. The boss mechanics they have gimmicks. Well, they're nowhere near as tight as World of Warcraft or the Secret Worlds. They're adequate enough and forces the player to change up their tactics every once in a while. The exploration mode of the dungeons are quite a bit harder. Instead of just being piecewise versions of normal story mode, it's actually a continuation of the story and opens up new areas for players to explore. The multiple group raid content in this game is actually in the normal world. There are group events which require a large amount of players to tackle, and often involve bosses with multiple phases or even phases with multiple bosses. These group events are scattered all across the world and vary in difficulty. The reason why I categorize this as raid content is after the game dies down a little bit, more coordination is required to get enough people to do these group events. And they still take a long time to take down, depending on how many people you have. The wonderful part of this system is even if a player likes to solo a lot, they can still experience the raid content if they're lucky enough to wander by when a large guild or medium-sized guild decides to do the content. The PvP parts of Guild Wars 2 are separated into two parts, Structured PvP and World v World v World. In Structured PvP, players are put into small groups and pit against each other. They're leveled up to level 80, or they're bumped up to level 80, and have the highest level of armor and weapons, as well as runes available to them, so they can just make a level 2 character and go right into Structured PvP. It also creates a level playing field so that no one team or no one person has an advantage over the other person. You have the same options, it's just dependent on how you build your character and how you equip yourself. Because of this, it's a lot more strategic and a lot more emphasis is put into the individual player skills as well as team cohesiveness. Tactics and communication play a huge role here. If a player gets stuck on a team with derby birds while the enemy team is full of windbots, well, GG. In World v World, the player is thrown into one of the Borderland maps or Eternal Battlegrounds. The Borderland maps are the home territory of one of the 3 servers currently at war, and the Eternal Battleground is kind of a no man's land where all 3 fight over it, usually right after a server restart or rematch. 3 servers pit against each other based on a ladderish system. Depending on how well they do, they're pit against servers of roughly the same level. This isn't perfect, but it kinda works when it works. In a typical day in World v World, you can see other players shouting, "Where's the Zerg?" On less organized servers, it's common to see gigantic cluster bananas of people, either following one or several verbose commander's orders, or just magnetize the nearest enemy, usually to keep in the middle stone mist and getting themselves killed. When 2 Zergs clash, it's often not a matter of skill, but a matter of numbers and who happens to be unlucky enough to be at the tip of the spear. Here, players are scaled to level 80, and their PvE gear is carried over as well, so it actually matters what you have equipped. Siege weapons also play a vital role in success. They're needed to break down gates and take down other siege weapons. They're very, very important, and they cost quite a bit too, which is why a lot of players don't tend to buy them and they leave it to other people. It also requires supplies to build, which means you need multiple people to build any siege weapon. Although the PvP content may seem paltry compared to the amount of PvE content there is, the content that is there for PvP is pretty damn fun. It also resonates ArenaNet's design philosophy of keeping things simple and letting the player fill in the gaps. In an MMO, what draws players the most is being able to play with their friends and the ability to share their experiences with friends. The RPG elements fill in the lore and create a vibrant world, as well as allow players to customize their builds and their looks. In a good PvP game, or a long-lasting one, the combat must be skill-based to a certain extent, and there must be a level playing field, while the RPG elements fill in the builds and min-maxing part of it. And the rest is just repetition. And if the game is fun, though, that isn't too big a deal. Games like Counter-Strike have lasted this long solely on one goddamn map. But enough rambling. All in all, Guild Wars 2 is a fantastic game, well worth the price tag, and then some. Like the original Guild Wars, it doesn't have a monthly fee. With the amount of content in the box, there is well over 60 hours of gameplay. Not many games can say that nowadays. The music is moody and fitting, the visuals are colorful and vibrant. The only issue I have with the game is voice actings in certain parts are more miss than hit. And for the love of baby gorillas, why the hell can't I join World v World as a group with friends? That aside, anyone looking to sit down after a long day's work, looking to spend a moment with a game, only to realize that moment lasted 8 hours and work is in 45 minutes, Guild Wars 2 is a wonderful date. Thank you for joining me in this moment with Guild Wars 2. Until next time, Larg.